Hello, everybody. Welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, Season 3, Episode 32. 32 episodes into the season already. I'm not 100% sure, but I think that next week will be the last episode of the season. We'll have to find out. Just trying to get things a little more organized. There we go. So, how is everybody doing? Welcome on YouTube. Welcome on Twitch. Sound off if you're in the chat. Start getting those questions together. We got Chop and Digital Meat. Scott, Sid, Dean, Burned, welcome, Tobias, MW, Volta, Anchor Feet, Zach, people popping in every second. So yeah, welcome. Hope things are going well. We're going to be tackling Cinema 4D questions. Let me open up that one as well. So as we get some people in the room, we got questions coming in already. Luminetrix, Mick, let's see. Travis, Tom, Senro. I'll just say Senro. Hello, welcome, Scott. So let's see what's going on. Scott's asking, did anything happen? Anything interesting from Half-Res? Nothing super to report. We got to do some pinball. Gave away a couple free copies of plugins. Just a fun night of hanging out with people. We had a taco food truck. I love food trucks, so that was a fun bonus to have this year. Let's see. Travis. Yep, I got some questions coming in. Okay, so a couple of things I wanted to go over. First of all, I wanted to get general opinions from people because everybody who shows up here at least has an interest in Cinema 4D. So I had a thought. I've got some plugins I've been working on. Well, I mean, not plugins, sorry. There's some tutorials I've been working on. I've got a kind of halfway developed tips and tricks video in Cinema 4D. And, you know, tips and tricks are, you know, for the most part, it's going to work with a lot of versions back in cinema. So an opinion, or I'm asking a question of how many people are going to be updating their cinema to R25 because it looks, well, here's the big thing. It looks so different. So essentially there's going to be tutorials that are pre-25 and then tutorials that are post-25. Because if I start recording in 25, it's going to be pretty hard to follow along in a lot of ways in older versions of cinema. And if I record in older versions, then I'm not future-proofing it because, you know, as time goes on and additional versions come out, more and more people are going to be in newer versions. So now I'm stuck in this weird place of, you know, what version do I record in? Like today I'm planning on doing the stream in 25, like we always do everything in the newest version. But I need to, you know, get everybody's, well, I want to get people's opinion about how I do something like record tutorials. Because I think it's a bad idea to stick in the old one for too long, but there could be like this transitional time where you wait, you know, they've been doing 2 versions a year, so let's say we wait 6 months and there's another one. So it's like, okay, there's kind of like 2 versions of the new interface out. But it does look very different. It is a very different layout. So if somebody was, let's say there's a newbie, somebody new in cinema and they're playing around, if they didn't have the newest version, something recorded in 25 is going to be like incomprehensible. So it's super tricky. And yeah, well, and I guess, you know, I've got hundreds of hours of live streams from Rocket Lasso, but I don't have too many tutorials. Meanwhile, back in the days of GSG, we were doing tutorials all the time. So hundreds of tutorials have become mostly obsolete with the giant interface change. So as much as I do like the new interface, it does invalidate, you know, thousands and thousands of hours of tutorials online. So yeah, Squizzy is saying that you're in 23. Or 22, 23, and now 25. And yeah, I often am working, well, especially for plugin development, you know, we develop our plugins all the way back to R20. So I've got copies of R20 and then 23 and 24, every version, so I can test it. But yeah, just asking. You use R25 with the old layout. Yeah, that's a weird hybrid. I don't know if that's making anybody happy then. It's an idea though. But yeah, that's just some thoughts. But yeah, it will be nice to get a tips and tricks video out there. Let's see. Before we start tackling anything in the way of proper questions, I wanted to switch over to the desktop. I tweeted this out the other day, and somebody had asked a tech support question with Ricochet, and I thought the answer was really cool, and I ended up being able to develop it even a little bit further. So here's a landscape object. And here's a bunch of spheres cloned onto it. So just geometry. You can see that it's got lots of polygons. And I've got a Ricochet set up. So Ricochet is a plugin that Rocket Lasso releases. But I am it's generating this ricochet based on this matrix object. So if I take the matrix, I can modify the matrix and have it be, you know, like less separation, and we can increase the count. And you'll see that ricochet, of course, is shooting out a laser, and it's going to bounce. But I'm telling it, like, don't bounce, like stop as soon as you do a single collision. So you see that those are not escaping out the back. But where this gets interesting is if I take this cloner, this matrix object, and I set it to radial mode, then I can get this big circle traveling around. And of course we could change the radius of that, and I could change the count of it to be very small or very large. And now that I'm doing that, I can make a matrix, and I'm cloning this matrix onto the tip of every single one of those. Really simple. I just dragged in the ricochet. I say create a count of 1, and I say go all the way to the end. So yeah, those go all the way near the end. And then hiding that, I could turn on a tracer object looking at that matrix, and now I get a spline or a tracer line going on the tips of each of those. So now that that's happening, I can sweep it, and now we get a kind of an automatic outline that's following the perspective of the landscape. So then entirely hiding the ricochet, I can grab this and just move it around, and wherever I move it, you can see the ricochet is nice and fast, even with all of these polygons. As I move this around, you can see it drawing and connecting each of those. So I thought that was kind of a cool effect. And it's not even limited to that. I mean, it's going to be like casting shadows essentially, but I could tilt it and rotate it and change it to a cone or a straight line or kind of anything. But I thought that was kind of cool. So just throwing it out there in case anybody was interested in how that was put together. But, and I guess that's here now, so I can save this as a scene file for the episode. Let me go ahead and do that. Episode 32, scene files, 01A, we'll say Ricochet. Actually, I usually put Ricochet in the beginning so people know that that is going to require a plugin. And I don't even know what to call this. Follow landscape. Good enough. Alrighty, so catching up to the chat again. Yeah, just throwing out a little extra something there. But now I'm going to scroll back up and start tackling those questions. Welcome, Hatchetburger. It says first time viewer. Welcome, welcome. Anyway, yeah, some questions started coming in up here. I will start clicking on those. What was the first one? Dean asked about going over the global pins node. And you know what? I don't know how good I'm going to be at doing that, but let's see. Let's find out. So in R25, there was something I didn't really talk about in the video, and that is they made a couple of preset assets. And let's see if we can work with them. So I'm going to search for the word global. And yeah, so global pins is existing as, I think it can be dragged in here as an object, right? But Rick had an example, but it was like an entire scene file. So, pin head, yeah, there's a lot going on here. Yeah, this is seeing global pins. So, okay, we can probably do something, but we got to figure this out. Anyway, here's the idea. They put together a tool. If I double click on that, maybe it's sealed off. Maybe we can't get into the nodes themselves. I'm going to click on node view and see if we can go inside. Maybe I can search for the global. But anyway, last week we were showing how you could kind of build your own tools a bit. And yeah, this seems to be closed. No, edit asset. Yeah, okay, we can go inside it. So this is going to be a gigantic series of nodes doing tons and tons of things. You can see that there's a lot of nodes there, but I bet you that there's a lot of nodes inside of nodes. Yeah, like here's a build flight path. So inside of there are more nodes. Inside of there is another node that's doing more things. So, and it looks like inside of here is something called flight path, which is in itself another generator that has all of its own parameters going. So a lot going on there. So you can just drag that global pins directly into your scene manager and now work from there. Now let's see if I can make this do something. Creating a sphere, I'll make a bunch of segments and go to global pins, generator. There's a lot of settings here. There's a radius, which is good. That's a big radius. So let's say 200 for now. And material, let's not worry about that. Pins, maybe labels. Flight path, I think, is the important one. Flight path, altitude. I'm not seeing anything yet. Flight path material. So here are the cities. And I would think that we'd be seeing something right now. But we're not. Let me keep trying to check it out a little bit more. There might be... Like I said, I haven't played with this. I just knew it existed. That should be placing the pins. That's the size of the globe. Oh, there's a draw globe. That's interesting. I mean, we've got our own. It says draw globe, but there is no globe being drawn. File input. Maybe that requires an input file, which I don't have. Yeah, Rick had a one where this is all built out, and I'm not entirely sure to use it, but it does a really cool thing. Rick demoed it last time. I'm not sure what I'm missing for this to actually generate something, but I think it might need like a CSV file that is linking to like the latitudes and longitudes of a bunch of different cities, which apparently doesn't come with the file. And I don't know if it exists. I wouldn't even know how to find it. Can we search for .csv? I highly doubt it's in there, but no, I don't know what that is. Let's see if there is a preset scene file, although I would have thought we'd see it. But let's go to scenes, maybe new content. That actually might only come from the internet. Are they downloading or are they not tagged as new? Presets, features, scene nodes. Yeah, these are the same as they used to be. Templates and presets. Yeah, none of these look like what we are currently looking for. And I don't know if my internet's being slow or maybe the Maxon server is being slow, but it's not seeming to populate things very quickly. You see even those images are taking a little while to pop in. So if I click on new content, it's not popping in. So I guess we'll just have to hold. Well, I clicked on scenes. Let's say all. Maybe that's my fault. Nope, still nothing popping up in there. Well, we'll just have to wait on that. I'll ask Rick about the global pins and see what we need to make it work. Or there's probably a video online somewhere of somebody using it from Maxon. But yeah, I think that it's requiring the data from the cities. So sorry, I wish I could answer it, but I cannot right now. Scrolling back up, somebody had a question I want to take a look at. Oh, interesting. Any chance you could show how you go about creating a quick rubber hose stick character? Okay, interesting. Mute. Hang on, I got a commercial going. I'll pop it up on the screen. Skip ad. Oh, okay, nice reference. So it looks like we're checking out like some super old-timey cartoon. So this is back when they had, I'm not seeing super noodle arms. Maybe it comes a little bit later. I mean, these people seem to have elbow. Oh, okay, that's getting a little noodly. There we go. Well, okay, that's getting crazy. We're not going to get that crazy, but yeah, we can talk about do some very basic rigging here. It's actually pretty straightforward. So the basics are you just need a joint chain somehow. So we got several ways we could approach this. First of all, why don't we just do it with a spline? So I'm going to make a helix spline, which is still in vanilla cinema the best way to make a straight line. And let's get rid of all those subdivisions. And now you can see I've got a straight line going out in a direction. This is going out 200. So let's tell it exactly how many subdivisions we want. Let's say 10. And then probably make it editable. Let's set the intermediate points to none. And I'll turn that off temporarily and make that editable. So now that we've got that spline, I can go to character and convert and say convert spline to joints. And now you see it makes a joint chain exactly 200 long, and it makes one every, well, there's 10 different points, so it made 10 different joints for us, and automatically stack them up together. So really easy to make that just by pre-making your spline. Right-clicking on the joint, we shall go into rigging and IK spline tag. It wants a spline. The spline will be the helix. It wants the end point of the joint chain, so that will be this final joint. And that is now built. We have more advanced things like the twist and whatnot, but we don't have to worry about those. Now, right now, we have a spline that contains 10 points. We intentionally made it that way. But for the purpose of handles, I think I'd like to simplify it. Let's temporarily hide the joint chain. Go to point mode and select. And I only want the first, the last, and the middle. And I can hit UI delete and delete like these other ones. So now I just have 3 points. So with only 3 points, that means our joint chain is willing to accept 1, 2, 3. And I can say create, 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 and made 3 nulls for us. And you can see null 1, 2, and 3. Typically what I do here would be make some sort of control. There's a lot of ways of doing it, but let's keep it simple. Just make an end side, and I'll make it a child, 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 and then Shift C. I think it's called reset transform. Not the quickest thing to type in. I guess there's a shortcut for it. Alt O or Alt 0. Let's find out. Alt 0. Okay, Alt 0 is now the shortcut for reset transform or reset PSR. Actually, one of my bigger complaints of the new interface is in R23 and 24, they put the reset PSR button up in the upper bar, because I've been talking about that thing for years. It's like, hey, look, everybody, it's up in the bar. So we've been talking about that for the last 2 years. And then they renamed it. And it's like, okay, in 24, they renamed it. It's like, well, it sucks that it's a different name, but at least it's here in the interface. But now they got rid of it in the interface, and now it lives down here in reset transform inside the coordinate manager. So they've changed it like 4 times in 4 versions. So it's like, that's a little annoying. Anyway, we got these end sides now as children of them. I want to rearrange them so I can put the nulls inside the end side instead. So now I can always grab the end side and move. I can now move those end sides. You can see that we can kind of get the sneaky thing going. So with that doing its thing, a couple of cool things that we can do. First of all, that's a joint chain, but a really straightforward way of getting a clean result from this would be select all of those joints and trace them. So let's say a tracer, and the tracer should probably come after the object it's referencing. Actually, it unfortunately only put in the first one, so I'll lock that, select all the joints, and drag them in. I middle mouse clicked on it, so it selected all of them. And now deselect that, so now all of those are selected. So now if I hide those joints and hide the helix, we should be able to say, okay, tracer, connect all elements. Nope, connect elements, maybe. I think the line might be directly on the grid. I never like having the grid on anyway. So I'm going to change my preset to the crisp preset, which is going to hide all of that. And now we can try that again. Where are you hiding, tracer? Those are the joints. Connect all elements. Why am I not seeing a spline here? Let's put it into a sweep and then feed that an inside. Okay. Now, tracer, you're seeing all those objects. Connect all objects. Don't trace vertices. Okay, sorry. I had to turn off the vertices. Okay. That's not what I expected, but turn off trace vertices. Set this to be more, let's say 12. And yeah, now it is on connect all elements. It's connecting all the joints. So that means we can grab those different, let's go to object mode. I can now select these different splines and move those around. You can see how we're getting this hose look, which is just fine. But you probably want that to be more curvy. One thing I can do right now is reset the PSR, or what I usually do is put each of these into their own null. But we can also go into coordinates and say freeze transformation. If you've never gone in there, each of these exists in some spot in space. You can see that this is at -100. But if we select them all and say freeze all, then you see they're now all at 0, 0, 0, because it's kind of like they're internally stored in a null, or it's mathematical, but you can almost imagine they're zeroed out that way. So what that means is I could take this and move it, and now if I click that reset transform, it's going to jump back to that position. Okay, now we're free to move these around without kind of fear of them not being able to go back where they belong. The tracer is doing its usual thing of lagging 1 frame behind. Maybe if we move the helix down, that will work. Oops, didn't mean to click freeze all. Get rid of that and hit reset transform. Yeah, okay, maybe that did fix it. We had to, no, it's not, didn't fix it. There's still that 1 frame of lag with the tracer. But anyway, moving this up in the air, a couple things we can do. First of all, it's mostly in this tag. In this tag, you can see right now it's staying the same length all the time. So instead, I could say, don't fit, instead be equal. Wait, fit should be it, isn't it? Oh, maybe it was just, was that just a frame of, no. Fit, yeah, I want it to be equal. That seemed like there was a frame of lag on it. Anyway, no, that seems to be correct now. So now you can see that no matter how far I stretch this, that it is always sticking on the ends and this middle part. And then next up we have the curve, but the curve is controlled via the handles. So inside of these handles, we could, I guess it's the middle one we want. I can grab this and increase the handle. You see that that can become larger or smaller depending on the handle. So we're just changing the Bezier handle. So because we redefined the spline only have 3 points, there are 3 points, and those the tangents are controlled by this depth multiplier. So something I like doing would be maybe linking that to some other parameter. One that could be neat would be linking them to the scale of the end side, and there's a reason for doing it that way. Let's set these radiuses to something kind of reasonable. So let's say 20. So yeah, relatively small. We could even go really, yeah, let's keep them relatively small. So if I grab, let's start with the middle one because it's the most visual. If I grab that one and say I want to right click on the radius and say Espresso set driver, and then go into the handle, which is the middle one, and right click and say Espresso set driven absolute. And now inside of that Espresso tag, double click it, it'll open up. So yeah, there were no changes in the interface except for some of the colors in Espresso, but now we have a radius which is going to drive the depth. So using this range mapper, we can control those very directly. Temporarily, I'll lock that, and by grabbing the radius, that means I can select this and hit T for scale, and you'll see as I scale up, it's actually scaling the handle. So now, as an animator, I could just grab this, move it around, and then hitting T for scale, I can shrink that down and control it. And I'm actually, what I would be keyframing would be the radius. But we can change the ratio if we want to. It's actually not bad. I don't mind that. But we could say that when it goes from 0 to 20, it'll go from 0 to 100. So that means it's a lot stronger. So that means this can be a lot smaller or larger. We could also say, actually, let's start out larger. So it starts out at 20, goes all the way up to 40. And that will drive the radius. So you can see that we have a little bit more reasonable size of the radius, and that controls the handle a little bit better, and we can just scale and get control. So now that that is built that way, we could drive the other ones if we were so inclined. Let's unlock that and grab, let's just say start, mid, end, and drag. I guess we can just make triples of this. So I'll say that that's the mid, so we'll change this one to the start, change this one to the end, and they need to drive different things. So the end one should drive that. I'll just drag the link over there, double click that one to remove it, and grab the first one and drag it over. There's a good reason for dragging it over the way I am, because if we were to click on here and try and find those handles, you're going to see that they're all named the exact same thing. So it's called depth, depth, depth. And it's like, well, which one do we need? So the best way of doing that is just dragging it over because it's based on the name of the parameter. Anyway, now we got 3 different end sides with 3 different radiuses driving 3 different depths. So now I should be able to grab any handle, move it around, and everything goes with it. T for scale. Oop, looks like I did those backwards. Easy enough to fix. I'll just swap that to that and that to that. Rearrange. Okay, that was my fault. So now if I scale this up, you can see that I can change that handle. I can select this one, T for scale, scale up that handle. And they all have that same relative range mapper because I just copied them. Now, it's not terribly smooth spline. Several things you could do, but the easiest one is in your tracer. The tracer has the type, the interpolation of the spline, so we are able to change that type to something like a B-spline, which is the super smooth one, give it some intermediate points, so we could say subdivided or natural. Uniform's a good one. I actually like them to be uniform because I don't want the numbers changing constantly. Hitting NB, you can see that as we increase it, that we're saying there should be 2 points in between each of the previous ones. And now I'm saying there should be 3 points in between each one. We could change that to something like adaptive, but now you'll see that it's actually going to be changing point count as it moves. So when this straightens out, you'll see there's fewer or there's more, which could be good, but depending on what you're doing, you could get some popping happening. So if you wanted to not be adapting to it, then you leave it on something like uniform, and that number doesn't need to be terribly, oop, I'm in the wrong control. Change that to something like uniform, so now it's going to stay that way all the time. So yeah, now it should be nice and smooth and consistent. We've got a nice noodly arm, able to move around, do whatever we want. And, you know, this could be implemented into any kind of character or anything. So let's save this because we have not yet. Let's go 1A noodle arm. And now let's turn it into something. Why not? So those are the controls. I'm completely fine with that. But let's put the put together like a noodle arm rig. So this will be, you know, noodle arm rig, and then everything involved in that. I mean, it's usually I would separate out the geometry, but in this case I won't. We'll just put that all inside the rig. So that essentially becomes the rig. We don't need the helix anymore. We don't need that. We don't need that. So now we've got 3 controls, and I can select them all and reset, transform. Oh yeah, the shortcut, Alt 0. Nice. Okay, so yeah, all zeroed out, ready to go. But we are in a situation in which we could create something additional. Do I have anything handy? I'm trying to think of anything goofy. Let's find something on the asset browser. I'm going to search for objects and grab appliances. And let's grab this tea kettle. That sounds fun. That downloads automatically, so all these aren't on your hard drive. Hide that. Okay, cool. We got tea kettle. Now, do we want to? Oh, I guess it's going to be a giant, scary tea kettle. So I'm going to make that way larger and make a master control. So we'll make an N side. Lay that flat on the ground. I like these being laid out this way, so you don't have to click the drop down. So that will be. Rename it to the body. And then inside the body, that's a start. I guess he should be renamed start, and that one's the end. Cool. So now the start becomes a child of the body. And I'll rearrange the order of those. And the kettle goes wherever the body goes. So we'll just do that in the simplest way possible, just by changing the hierarchy. And let's say the start will begin here. And then, let's see, grab this and spin it. The tangent goes a long way for having the orientation be correct. So now we can do that. And select this one. Move it along. So before we go, and I can scale that down, which is nice. Okay, so let's change that to look however we want it to before we make duplicates. So let's say that it's larger. And now I can use the details to shrink it in the beginning. Let's have it, I want it to go wider on the end there. And actually have that go skinny, and maybe it can connect in a slightly bigger way. Okay, cool. So having done that, let's move the start inside of it more. Maybe scale it up a bit so it's just lined up on the surface nicely. Okay, cool. So that's pretty much exactly what I want. Get a nice little bit of arc in there. Okay, so then we need to duplicate all of those. So I'll select start, end, middle, noodle arm rig, copy, paste, and make a null, and grab everything I just duplicated. That null I'll spin around 180. Nice. And now put the start in the start, put the mid, all these can just be yanked out. And then one last time I'll select all of those. So all the controls in the rig, not that. Copy paste. I'll drop all those into the null again. R for rotate, spin those 90 degrees again. Okay, cool. And then put everything where it belongs. So the starts go in the body, and these can just move down to the bottom. We could, of course, be more organized, but I'm trying to do this quickly. So let's save this as the next version. Okay, so now we've got a very, very simple rigged up character where you can see we've got all of this different geometry. It's all set up, ready to go. But now the fun part being I can select this. We don't need so much radius. And I can grab this and move the teapot, and the legs are going to be connected because we put the start controls inside of it. So we are free to have that move and grab all the controls and make an entire crazy walking animation. I should be able to hit T for scale those away, and have it start stomping around through and make whatever animation I want there to be. So a lot of ways we can modify and change the rig and create different animations and anything that you want. But just showing you that once you start building this type of rig, it's pretty straightforward to, have, total control over the way it's going to be placed and what it's doing. Maybe this one's, maybe it's a tripod and this is like a trunk. Yeah, there we go. But anyway, yeah, you can have a lot of fun there. Even if we grab that original control and rotate it, you can see that there's still going to be stuck to it, and we can still animate that and move around. It's always fun. We could have built this as an IK rig and Noodle arms on top of the IK. Things layer and layer and layer. It goes through the very, very specifics of what you want it to do. But yeah, I dig it. So let's give that a save and maybe tackle another question unless there's any follow-ups to this. Winbush, welcome. Thanks for hanging out. Alex is asking what my favorite new feature or change in 25 is and my least. Well, I think the capsules are by far the best feature. Well, let's see. Yeah, I think capsules are great because the concept makes it so that we can start using nodes in the object manager and, inside of Cinema. So we can actually kind of make something practical, and you can also use it as modeling, like parametric modeling tools, which, there's a chance that questions will come up and we will use them that way because it's just a good workflow. And then the presets are unambiguously great. I really love those preset things where you can take any object in Cinema and then save it as a preset automatically and save different modes out, so different presets. I mean, even right now, just as a quick demo, if I were to make a cloner, all the time we're using different types of cloners. So maybe right now it's like, well, when we create it, it comes in as a grid. And it's like, well, making it as a grid is great. Let's throw in a cube just so we can see something visual. So if we make that a grid, it's like, okay, that's a fine default. But what if we want to make a grid that is exactly, that's per step. So what if I want it to be exactly 10 steps in between, and I want this to be 10 by 10. I guess it would be 100 by 100. So there's a 100 by 100, 10 by 10 grid, which is huge. That's actually more than I bid. That's more than I bargained for. Let's drop that down to the 50 by 50. Oops. And I'll set that to 20. 20. Okay, so let's just call that a new preset. So I can say, okay, let's save that as preset, and I'm going to set that to 50x50. And that tells me pretty clearly what it is. But now let's say that I want to have a different preset. I want to have a radial, and radial for me, let's just say I always want this following on not Z, so we'll do that one, and give it a radius of 200 and a count of 100. So it's like, okay, cool, that's another preset that I might reach for pretty often. So I can say, okay, now I want another, say, preset, and this one will be radial 100. So now, even if I open up a new scene file, I can make a cloner, and we'll put something inside again. But now, even a new file, I can click on this drop-down, and we can see the presets, or you can click on this little drop-down and see the different names. I can click on my 50 by 50 and instantly get that, and click on radial 100 and instantly, oop, did I not do radial 100 correctly? Oh, that's weird. Maybe I clicked on default. But yeah, there's my radial 100. And you can actually click on that little flyout, and you click on this little crown. And if I click on that crown, that means that is the default one. So even if I open up another, let's delete that and create a brand new cloner, it's now coming in with those settings. So you see it's already set to radial. And actually, it looks like the interface didn't update properly there. Maybe there's a bug. Well, Burned, if you're still here, it looks like there might be a bug here, because if I drop something as a child, will that force it to refresh? No, yeah. See, that should have defaulted to radial. Yeah, the crown's on there, but you can see it says radial, but the interface didn't refresh. So once I click it again, it does. But yeah, it looks like there's a bug there. Okay. Checking out on questions. Oh, I guess the other bit being my least favorite. I mean, if I was getting specific, it's that they got rid of that reset the reset PSR button from up in the interface right when we get used to it. Right here, this would be such a perfect spot for it, right next to the position scale, or the XYZ. But, and then, I mean, honestly, it goes to like a million tiny things that could be growing pains. Like, I really hate that this tool, it's telling you what tool you're currently on. Is that even what it is? Yeah, if I hit E or R, the tool's right there. I don't want that right there. That's right in the middle of my viewport. Like, look, there's nothing happening down here. If I hold down control, I could drag it down there. So why is this hanging out right there in the middle? I don't like that visually there. But, you know, I also have a lot of preferences for just keeping my viewport as simple and clean as possible. So yeah, lots of little things maybe like that. And yeah, I can't really think of anything else that jumps out at me. Yeah, Dean. Yeah, nodes are intimidating, and they are potentially intimidating, and there's a lot to do. And there's, even right now, I do not think they are artist friendly right now. I don't think they're intuitive. Like, Cinema 4D has a reputation for being very artist friendly. I'm looking forward to them building a node system that ultimately is artist friendly. But right now, it's very technical. There's things that I find that are, and I mean, I'm just voicing my opinions here, but if we are in the node space, there are certain nodes that just shouldn't be named the way that they are. It just goes to like, okay, like how many people actually know what a matrix is? Matrix is a very mathematical and complex thing where, okay, that's actually one of the more straightforward ones. The usual ones, when you make a matrix, like vectors to matrix, you get this V1, V2, V3, and this is kind of mathematically speaking a position, scale, and rotation. But in order to get the proper like scale, this has to be like 1, 1, 1, and then offset is the position. It's deeply unintuitive. So it goes to cinema artists. They're used to something being called like a transform or something. So why isn't this PSR? Now they did make a different node, so you can make compose matrix, and this one actually is translation, scale, and rotation. So that one does translate, but it goes to when you decompose a matrix. I guess that one is also outputting translation, scale, and rotation. A lot of things end up being named the same thing. If we actually go to build something in here, I'm sure we'll see me bump into it a bunch of times where you're just never quite sure which node to grab because a lot of things have very similar names. And it's very technical. So we'll see how that goes in the future. But I'm sure we will be using a bunch of nodes, especially now that we can build capsules. There's a good chance we will start doing it. Let's see. Okay, setting up a rig that does this. Let's see what we get. I wonder if we've gotten a question about this before. What do we got? So this is, I think, Chinese. That interface could be cinema, but maybe not. Maybe it's Blender. I'm not. They're clearly moving something around. I'm not sure fully what the context is. Let's translate. Refresh with a B. I'm guessing that's not a great translation. I'm just not even sure what we're looking at, mechanically speaking. Like, I'm not sure what the user is controlling to do what it's doing right now. It seemed, well, if I had to guess, it's like there's a shape here and a shape here, and this movement is allowing it to transition from one to the other. Like, that's what my interpretation is. But that's a way more abstract. Let's see, before we get there, Twinny is asking about what mouse I use, and I'm using a Razer mouse. It is a Razer Death Adder. But I think one came with my laptop, and I really liked it, so when it died, I bought another one. And I keep my speed, like, pretty quick. Like, let's see, I'm going to move my mouse from the left all the way to the right side of the screen, and I probably only moved my mouse about 2 inches. So, like, I have the sensitivity pretty far up. Anyway, so, okay, if that's a rig transitioning from one shape to another, even that, I mean, there's a lot of, the specifics matter here. So we're just going to play around and see what we end up with. To begin with, what if we, I want to make it so that we do have options for it to transition. But I'll start out with a cube, so we're in like a shape that stands out a bit more. go to my preset so I don't see the grid. So if we were to make, it would be a really good use case for Ricochet actually, but let's say we're not using Ricochet. What is a good way of creating a bunch of lines in there? Well, let's keep it simple. Well, you know, it'll get complex, so simple is a relative thing. Let us create a helix just because it's got some lines going on. What I really want is some scribbles. We can, how do I want to do this? Let's, I just thought of a completely unrelated way of trying to do this. Let's create a matrix. The matrix will be set to object, and the object shall be the cube. So now it's randomly placing a bunch of matrices on the surface of the cube. Now, create a tracer object. So now the tracer will connect all elements. And now, yeah, essentially these are randomly connected now, which is what I was going for. Now that that's happening, I would like to subdivide it a bunch. So let's subdivide somehow. This is setting it to a set length, which could work. Although it's unsubdivided, but why is I'm not getting a maximum length now? That makes no sense to me. Maybe because it's linear. Maybe because this was linear. Okay, so maximum angle, and we'll do a couple steps. Let's say every 20 units is going to make a new subdivision. Cool. So now all that is happening. So if I were to say I want that to... I want to push that out to collide with the surface. So let's grab a deformer, and we got all these nice icons. Check out the explosion, great icon. And then we got the melt and the shatter and the jiggle. I love those icons. Super cute. But I don't know them intuitively. Which one are we looking at? Probably shrink wrap. If I grab shrink wrap, does this work on a tracer? I want the target object to be the cube. I want it to be based on the normals. Maybe based on the target axis. Yeah, maybe target axis. So now it's looking at the axis of the object, checking out the line, and then shooting it back until it collides with a wall. So this should, for the most part, yeah, be pretty hollow. The more we subdivide the spline, if we set that to 10, it's going to have a higher resolution and be able to transition. So that starts becoming like a decently hollow cube. Okay, so that's a thought. Now, what if... Unfortunately, the jiggle doesn't work on splines. I don't think the jiggle works on splines. What I want to do is let's create a lot of chaos here. I'm going to grab a seed and just animate that. So let's just super change the number. And select all keyframes, set that to linear. Okay, so if I hit play, that should be like pure static. It should be in the proper order, yeah. So that's pure static pretty much. Can we chill that out? I don't know. In order to find out, we will grab a jiggle and put it as a child of the tracer and see if we get any visual. No stiffness, lots of drag. Doesn't seem to be able to work. The point count might be changing because we're using subdivided. Let's try... not subdivided. I'm still not seeing it. I didn't honestly think that a jiggle would work for us. I just don't think it works on splines, which is unfortunate. Let me think. What I want to get a smoother transition between, like essentially I want this type of static, but I want a smooth transition between them. So how would I go about doing that? That should be a consistent point count. The super manual way I don't want to do. We could make it dynamic. That might not be a terrible idea, honestly, if it works. Simulation, soft body. Soft bodies are a softball. And so, actually, Zach, that's a neat idea. I'll try that first. Zach is suggesting that we try a delay effector set to point mode. I honestly don't know if that will work or not. Delay. And we'll tell that it's on blend mode right now, but let's set that to spring. deform the points. It seems like something's happening. That's the spring. Let's set that to blend. Yeah, I think that is working. They're all getting very centralized, which I suppose makes sense because all of these different points are like jittering from like wall to wall to wall to wall. And so this is blending between them. And so the more layers that we blend, the more likely that they end up in the middle. So that could be a fault in my premise. But yeah, thanks for the pointing out the delay effect. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that is unfortunate. I mean, yeah, that's a little more coherent, but still not. I don't feel like it's taking on the shape very well. It's not calming it down that much, and it just goes to keep in mind that like right now we have those completely randomly generating because it's just the seed driving them, and I can't. There's not an easy way of having a very clean distribution of them. Like there's not like a pseudo random. Ricochet could. I'm trying to do this not using Ricochet. Let me think. Yeah, all of those moving around all over the place. I don't want to separate them out to different planes. Yeah. As somebody just suggested, maybe moving the shrink wrap after. Yes, that is potentially going to help push it to the outside, but it's not going to stop it from being very static-y. Like, yeah, it's on the outside, but that's forcing everything out. If without that shrink wrap, everything's going to be very clustered near the center. As I turn it on, it's going to force it out to the outside of the cube, but you still have the total static. But, you know, maybe that's acceptable. Maybe we could still do that. Is there anything... I guess it'd have to be dynamic. I don't want to go dynamic, although dynamic would make for some interesting effects. The basic idea was going to be that we can do something like that where these are going crazy, moving around, and we double up the rig. So if that becomes, you know, rig 1, select all, deselect, make it a child. That's rig 1, so now we copy paste, now we get rig 2. Rig 2 could be moved over here, and right now they have identical seeds, but that's fine. They never overlap. So if those two things are doing, you know, different unrelated things, what if we made a new matrix? And that matrix, several things we might do. If we just set this to point, that might be able to bypass an extra element here. Let's see what happens. Okay, matrix, object mode. The object will be the first tracer. And now you can see, yeah, actually this I think will work because we have a count. So now there's exactly 10, but let's increase it. Let's go up to 50. So now you see I got 50 of those going all super crazy. So that is taking out whatever shape there, and then this is whatever shape it is here. If we apply a inheritance effector into the matrix. I can never remember if we want direct or animation. So let's just try dragging. Oh, we need a matching matrix for it. So we do need 2 matrices. That's fine. I shall make a duplicate matrix and move that one after. Now let's actually, I'll move it right here and just call it it's referencing number 2, okay? So that one will reference tracer 2. So now you can see I've just got an identical count of matrices on a second one. So now this original one is like, well, I'm supposed to be on tracer 1. This one is on tracer 2. But this inheritance, we can say, hey, you're referencing reference 2. So maybe it has to be an animation. Maybe not. Oh, morphin. Yeah, there we go. Morph motion object. That's what I was missing. So let's ignore that first reference. And now we just have this one. And as I grab that inheritance and I drag it, you can see we can actually transition between those two. So I feel like it would be good. Well, let's just see what happens. I guess if they're identical, that would just be the same thing in the middle. So we do want a different seed. So we will grab this matrix, and the easiest way would be select just that one. I'm going to crank up its seed, something different, and grab this first one and lower the seed. So now those are in different seeds. So now it's going to be transitioning between those two. So that inheritance is going to be like, oh, I'm all the way over here. I'm all the way over here. But what we can do is say it's 100% strength and then turn on a fall off. So I think we should go with a linear field. Set that to Z plus. Yeah, so now as we pass through, do you see how it's transitioning between them? So looking pretty kind of super crazy and twitchy. Let's see if we can calm that down. That transition's pretty harsh. There might not be any way of calming it down, but let's just find out. First of all, can we add a delay on top of that? So we got our matrix going. Add in a delay effector. I'll put that after the inheritance so we can visually see it. Now I'm going to say it's blending. That's fine. Let's do a lot of blending. So yeah, a lot of blending, you see it really calms down. So yeah, a decent amount of blend is actually doing an okay job of it. It's kind of similar though. You see it's kind of fighting in between. The rig we made is very... It's such a twitchy rig that we're going to be getting very twitchy transition is my point here. But and if we go back, you see it's even averaging that out in the exact same way. But as I transition here, you can see we can get those transitioning between. There does seem to be a... Oh, I hit the... We need more frames. Boing. Nice. I do like... I gotta get used to it, but you are able to click and just drag, which is pretty nice. Okay, grabbing the first two matrices, we do need that latter keyframe to be all the way at the end, so I'm going to jump it to 1000. Oh, the time to 1000. Okay, so those should be constantly changing. Actually, it's not changing often enough, so you see it's actually popping only occasionally, which might calm it down a little bit. So as this passes through, those are going to start pulling across and doing a transition until they're fully in the new one. So yeah, those do the transition. So then we can do another tracer. I'll just duplicate a tracer out and say that it's referencing our transitioning matrix. And you see there it is right now. Although, interestingly, well, I guess it does have its own... Oh, it's got the shrink wrap. That's probably what's doing it. I was like, why is it way over there? Okay, so now let's visually hide the original tracers. We don't need those anymore. And now we just see our new shape controlled by where this linear is. So if I move it all the way over, you can see that it's hanging out doing its thing over there. And now I can, as I pass through, it's going to be like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be transitioning over. And you see how that shape starts moving over. And once we go far enough over, the entire thing is now in this shape over here. So that can be given any effects on top of it that we want. We can hide the original matrix and turn on this delay to smooth those out perhaps. We could make that springy. Let's make it really springy. Yeah, that just keeps it a little bit more alive and overshooting. And taking that and moving across, that should still give us the crazy transition from one shape to another. Like I said, I wish the original shape hadn't been quite as chaotic. We would have had more control over it if it wasn't quite as chaotic. And there's definitely ways we probably could have gone about making it a little bit more consistent than just random seed. Even if we just had a helix that was like randomly spinning around, that would give us something a little bit more coherent. But yeah, we can get these nice transitions going between them. And the other thing was just very luminant and in the viewport. So we've got options here as far as taking this tracer and feeding it into whatever we want to. It could be a sweep, as simple as a sweep. We could also do sketch and tune. We could do a redshift line. You could throw this into a volume builder, volume mesher. I don't expect this to run super quickly in the viewport, although that's not a terrible poly count. Yeah, it's running all right. So now as we pass through, we've got more of a crazy blob shape that can transition from one side to the other. And I wonder how far you can push the magic bullet looks. That'd be interesting. But I don't know how well that would play in the viewport with stuff going on, but let's find out. Funky transition. Anyway, I was going to make a new material. Put down the volume mesher. That's interesting. Why does the volume mesher have an open shape, and then that one. I would think that those would be the opposite icon-wise. Anyway, luminant, I just want to make it really bright, so let's set that up to like 200. And I don't know how well that will show up in the magic bullet looks, but let's see if we can get like a glow going in the viewport. So I want a sky, and the sky, we can just say custom and make it real dark. Does that work? Nope, needs a material. And can we, how do we do it? Render settings, magic bullet looks, open magic bullet looks. Opened on the other screen. So we got all these different custom looks, but let's see. I'm going to click on tools, and then I'm not super familiar with this, but what's a good glow? Star filter, maybe? Whoa. We got angle, strength, size, boost, threshold. Oh, I guess we want a bigger threshold. That does seem to see the exposure, because I made mine super bright. So, well, that's kind of a crazy lens flare look, but well, why not? And anamorphic flare. Is that just the static one? I really just want some simple glows, but I'm not sure what settings those are. Ba, 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 da, ba. Is it anamorphic flare? No. Maybe. Is that placed? Takes on a lot of color. I just wanted to see it in the viewport. So, okay, whatever. Let's see. That's there. And now if we say in the viewport, I want to see magic bullet looks. Now we see that here in the viewport. I just wanted to see how quickly that ran. Oh, that's not bad. So in the viewport, we actually see that happening live. That's pretty good. So now I can drag that. I mean, it doesn't look great because I didn't do good settings on there, but we can actually get in the viewport it looking pretty nice and running pretty well, especially considering we're in the volume, and then letting those travel back and forth. The voxel size, tracer reference more, make it not as thick. I guess it needs to be at least 10. That makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Now you see it's a little thinner, and yeah, we can do those transitions better. So yeah, it's something. It's a weird one. Move on Z. Okay, I'm gonna save that. Cool. Now that I explained that without Ricochet, I just want to spend a second and talk about that we could have made something a bit more controllable. I'm not sure how much more controllable, but getting rid of a bunch of that stuff. Let's go back to, I'm going to turn off tons of things. Let's turn off everything. Just go back to the original rig 1. So we can go back to the original cube, the original matrix, and the original tracer, okay? So super simplifying. Turn those off. Okay, hide the cube, and now we have this matrix on the outside. And this is what we're ending up with right now, which is complete randomness because of where they're getting placed. So instead, that matrix, instead of using that matrix as it is, let's kind of step through this again. I'm going to delete that, and we've got our cube, okay? So I want to make a ricochet. So there's a plugin from Rocket Lasso. Creating a ricochet. It's now shooting a line out, and it's missing everything because it hasn't been fed a child. So I'm going to say I want to feed it an object. The object it will be referencing will be the cube. So once it's a cube, it's going to bounce around. So if I click to hide the cube, then now you can see we are bouncing around inside of the cube, getting as many bounces as we want, which, by itself, that could be what you want. But what I'm going to do is set this to count and set the count to 1. So what that is doing is shooting a single laser, hitting the wall, and stopping. So what that means is I could, actually, I'll select the ricochet and say, I want to, in the ricochet, say I want to create a matrix. And that makes a matrix object for us and puts it all on the edges. So it's a series of straight lines being generated. If I were to, what's the best way to show this? If I turn off the ricochet, you can see I've got a bunch of matrices on the surface, and it's shooting at a single laser from each one. Actually, well, yeah, we keep it simple. So let's keep it even more simple. Making a brand new matrix object. Oops. Making a brand new matrix object. I would like to set this to something simple. Actually, we'll just set it to linear, okay? So linear, I'm going to say 0. And now we can make as many as we want. I'm going to say 10 to start out. So there are now 10 matrices directly on top of each other. Then create a effector, and I would like it to be a random effector. And the random effector will tell them to randomly rotate. So position, don't do position, instead do rotation, and we can do a full 360 on all three. Okay, so now you see I've got a series of them all clustered on top of each other, sitting right there. On top of each other, different rotations. So then we make that a child of the Ricochet, and I shall say, okay, Ricochet, look at the matrix. So now every one of those becomes a starting point for a laser to shoot out and hit the cube. So now you can see we've got an entire series of lasers filling it out. If I go into that matrix and start cranking up the count, so we can make more and more and more, and every single one becomes a different laser. As I add more and more and more of those original matrix, we're getting more and more lasers coming off the Ricochet, and you can see that, start to see the shape of the cube emerge. So that's me going overboard on it. But if we keep it relatively simple, like at 100, select this random, and let's make it a random noise. And I want it to be indexed, so each one gets its own number. If I hit play, yeah, you see all those moving around, but they're moving really fast. So let's say animation speed 5, even 2. You can see that those original, these original matrices are just rotating. That's all that's happening. And now that means these individual lasers are each slowly moving around, doing their own thing. So with that in mind, what if we then clone, we're using a lot of matrices, but I do love the matrix object. Let's clone a matrix after the Ricochet. So this matrix will see an object. The object will be the Ricochet. And I can see that we got a bunch, we have 10 matrices per Ricochet, but I'm gonna say I only want 1. And then I'm gonna turn off loop. And as I grab the start, I can start dragging the start all the way off. And now you see these matrices will eventually stop right on the tip. So now we've got a series of matrices that are sitting on the edge. So now you'll see that I've made random motion that takes on the shape of the cube overall, but there's a coherence to them. They're randomly moving around on the surface. So that's why I'm saying Ricochet could do something like that. So now that we have that, we could create the tracer, which isn't doing anything yet. So turn on the tracer. Tracer sees the matrix, and now let's even turn that off from B-spline. Back to linear. So now you'll see that each of those matrices is interconnecting each other, and it's doing it in their order, but the order is randomly generated by the rotation. We can see that we do have a very coherent net going around. Let's hide the Ricochet, and now and let's even hide the matrix. And now you see we just have a series of lines interconnected on the edge. So then doing something like the B-spline, allowing them to round out. You can see I've now got a very coherent amount of motion transitioning around. So if that then gets the shrink wrap applied, that can now push them out to the edge, and now you can start seeing that that is not this crazy jittery mess moving all over the place. It is now very smoothly applied, and we can see how the motion is actually happening. And then we could put the delay anywhere we want, so the delay might smooth that out even more. That's going to calm them down if we were so inclined. And the tracer could have as many subdivisions as we want, so we keep on smoothing those out even more. Set that to adaptive, potentially. Set that down to like 5 degrees. So yeah, those can potentially get smoothed out. And yeah, just a way that the Ricochet could actually generate a coherent version of this if you were so inclined. And yeah, so you can make 2 different ones of those. Actually, kind of like that better as uniform. So yeah, you can get a coherent version of this, and you can make 2 different rigs of it, each doing different motion, and you can do the same transition between them. But yeah, I just want to throw out this additional way of building it. So that'll be the Ricochet version. Actually, I really simplified that down, so I'll delete everything subsequent. Boom, 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 because those aren't set up to do anything. Save, and we'll just call that one B_Ricochet. I guess because I brought up Ricochet. And whenever we do tackle a question that is going to involve a plugin, I'm going to do my best to explain it, answer it without using a plugin, and then show you how the plugin might improve your experience with it. So if ever I talk about a plugin, I don't want to be like, you have to buy the plugin. I want to be like, no, here's how you can solve it. But if you want to support, and if you want to have a tool that can maybe do it better or faster, then here's a different way of doing it. So that will always be my approach. And because I brought it up, if you go down in the links below, you should see a link to Patreon. And in Patreon, if you were going to get Ricochet, you can get really good discounts on the plugins. by supporting on Patreon. You get like big old giant discounts on the plugins if you're supporting on Patreon. But anyway, let's tackle more questions. Yeah, Dean, yeah, the magic bullet works on top of anything, and it works in the viewport as you just saw, so it's pretty cool. Smoothie effector PLE, yes. Let's see, Sid. I'm not sure if that's a link as a question or not. Mute. Ooh, okay. I gotta keep this tiny because I always get YouTube starts, even though I don't monetize my videos because I don't want people to have to watch commercials. YouTube, if I make it too big, it's gonna like capture it. There's only 50 views, but it looks like somebody's personal footage from animal life of a bunch of, I guess, some sort of fish. It's hard to tell. Some sort of weird catfish, maybe? But yeah, they definitely are forming like a branchy type thing. Yeah, you just linked directly to it without calling out a specific effect. It's almost like it's walking. Yeah, you can see them like going into the ground feeding. No. So that's kind of weird. Yeah, there's a lot of potential weird MoGraphy stuff you might be able to extract from a concept like this. It's a fun type of question. Let's open up a new file. See if you're gonna, there's different aspects to it. You can just do flocking behavior, like simple flocking behavior, and then put a tracer on it. Like that's super simple, super straightforward. And we can do a simple version of that. Let's see. I'll make a cube. Let's be very precise. So I'll make this to be 20 by 20 by 20 as a cube. And maybe it would even be, would that be a good idea? How do you make it a cloner but front heavy? I'm not sure. Let's keep it simple. So I'll throw that into a cloner. Can we grab my preset? 50 by 50. Oh, see, it doesn't refresh. Something broke down the preset. Burned! 50 by 50. I have to click it twice for it to actually acknowledge it. That's still way too many, though. I'll have to make a better preset. Anyway, we got a small cluster of those. We'll make them dynamic. Simulation, rigid body, and several things. Let's turn off gravity. Control D. Dynamics. Gravity, go away. Then I want them all to cluster up, which, well, let's do a couple things. Let's add a simulate. Let's keep it simple, and we'll just do an old school turbulence. Oh, I haven't clicked on this in 25. Looking at the icons is kind of neat. Wind, turbulence. Gravity's an apple. Cute. Okay, turbulence. Okay, so that's going to add a little bit of turbulence, so you should start moving around a little bit. Yeah, perfect. Exactly what I wanted. We're going to need lots more frames, so drag. And I want them to cluster up. So we can do simulation, dynamics, force, and now you see all of them get pulled into each other. We'll start from the beginning because, yeah, I figured they won't move. Excuse me. So something would probably be a good idea is give them an initial bit of randomness. So let's click random. And that only affects at the beginning, so now you can see they're moved around a little bit. So anyway, you see that clusters them up. Now this force doesn't need to be very strong. Currently, let's set it to 0.1. Well, yeah, you see that 0.1's enough to be like, no, we want to stick together, but not, it doesn't have to be crazy. And then we can start increasing our turbulence. So let's give it some scale and some strength. Let's do strength of 40, and now we should start seeing these move around. Now you see them starting to escape, so we either need more force or we can also add a fall off to our turbulence. So we make a spherical field, make it larger. And now as they escape, they should lose a lot of their turbulence, although that won't stop them from moving away if I make the force too weak. So let's just keep in mind some of those variables. Right now, if they escape, they will escape. Because once we get outside of kind of the 50 to 500 range, they get a lot weaker. Let's kill off a bunch of their friction. So no friction. They can freely slide past each other. As soon as I turn off friction, you see them immediately start moving around. Although they just seem to be doing that to cluster even closer together. They are technically cubes. The best shape to I would think the best shape for them to slide past each other would be a cube. I'll shrink the scale down even further and make the turbulence even stronger, because I want to see more individual movement. So we're starting to get a decent strength, and it's relatively small, but it's staying alive a little bit more. And let's see, make a floor. Make said floor dynamic. Whee! Move said floor down. And let's put some gravity back in again, but not much. Let's do 100 gravity. So now they're all clustered together. They'll fall on the floor, but they can't get through the floor. And how can we make... right now they're just kind of attracted to each other as a giant cluster. I'm trying to think of a good way we could fit them in the shape. And we could put them as soft body, put them in the big soft body blob, which would make sense for them like rolling around. Yeah, there's a lot of little nuances here, and every time I change one number, it's going to affect all the other numbers. Like by dropping that to 0.5, you can see that they can start moving away a little bit more. And you know, ultimately I was just going to take this and apply a tracer. And the tracer is now tracing the vertices, presumably. Although it does seem like it's only looking at the midpoint. But I'll turn off vertice and set this to be, well, there's from the space is global, local. I'm going to say the limit from the start. And I want it to go on for, I don't know, 10, 18 frames. I did it backwards. Okay, so now you see we get a bit of a line. So if we hide the original, now we just get a swirl of kind of crazy worms going. And then take that, feed that into a tracer would be the or the sweep would be the obvious thing. Inside, shrink, 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 shrink. Already looks kind of weird and gross. I like it. Then we can, let's see, sweep, please. Caps. I would like separate bevel controls. The start should have a bevel. Nope, that's the end. I guess they're backwards. You see I've rounded out the cap. We don't need much. We're getting some triangle explosions. We're not going to worry about those for now. And then taper. So scale down. So now we get whatever shape we want to have here. And we just get a whole big pile of worms swarming around. Now here's the thing, is that they are avoiding each other, but they'll pass right through each other's tails. Like there's nothing stopping them from chasing through a tail. But this is a nice, quick, like no intelligence way of doing something like that. And it's just whatever behaviors we want to feed in after it. So you should always turn that off and go back to your original dynamics if you want to get more control. So one thing I think we should do is create a field force. So simulate forces, field force, and the field force, I'll turn off this spherical field in the turbulence. We don't need that anymore. And in the field force, I'll make a spherical. So this is now saying, I guess in general what we want to do is a gigantic sphere with no, or maybe I don't want to do as giant. Here's a thought. What if we make a spherical field? We make it decently large. And what this means is as long as they're inside of the circle, they don't have any force applied. And as they slowly get further away, they're going to get more and more power applied. So what does that look like? Well, I think we'll need two different things. We'll need a second spherical field. So this one will be, I'm going to rename it to dir for direction. So that is the direction of it. And the direction I do want to be like huge and infinite for all purposes. So I'm going to just make it super huge under remapping. Let's give it no fall off or maximum fall off. Or yeah, I'm sorry, the inner offset all the way. Actually, I always go down one because I've found weirdness when you do 100. So anyway, that should be giving us a direction, which might be pushing in or pushing out. I don't know. Let's find out. I'm going to crank up the power a bunch. So these are either going to get pulled way together or explode apart. Pulled way together. Okay, that's pretty much what we want. We just want it to fall off. So this is like full power. This is giving a direction. What direction does it go? Now, we can give it a spherical fall off, which it already has here. So that's going to fall off in power. But we want this to be the opposite. So I'm going to say invert. So now, no power in the middle. Maximum power on the outside. So these should be kind of like drifting around, but you'll see when they fly out that they'll be like, no, I need to go back. So this gives them a little more freedom. And we don't need nearly as much force if we don't want to. Like we could lower this down to like 0.2, where they're more free to wander away. But when they wander away, there's now a force saying, yeah, but you got to go back again. So now you see we get more of a wild swarm of them going. So just a fun combination there. Although I did like them staying a little more clustered. So I'll put that back to 0.5. Okay, so now that's happening, and this is based entirely on the direction and spherical field. I will make one a child of the other because now we're free to take this and move it, and if I move it, it's going to be like, no, we should be over here, and that's going to let them move. We want to be careful about how fast we move that because already you can see that by moving it as quickly as I did, they got into this oscillation, so we could probably do that, but we'd have to move it really slowly. So as I move this, yeah, you see they're kind of swarming over there. But if we move it too far, they're going to all as a cluster go and overshoot. One way of potentially getting rid of this is to start draining a little bit of energy out from what they're doing. We can do that several different ways. One would be just some linear damping, which isn't a bad idea. We can go all the way up to like 90 degrees, and that's just going to drain overall energy. But the hope here would be as soon as that gets in the center, you see how they immediately stopped and they didn't keep on overshooting. 90 might be too much, so let's try 50. I tend to use larger numbers there, but let's see. We don't want too much overshoot. You see that they did overshoot. They're not as overshooty, so maybe that's a fine number. But yeah, there's just a lot of mix and match here. We could give this more strength so they're more inclined to like go a little bit crazy and wander away. And that might give us the ability to drain even more energy out. Just to calm them down. So yeah, just additional ways of adding those in. And keep in mind you have additional forces you could do. If you did want to get that rolling over effect, there are other fields like... We don't too often use it, but we've got the... Where is it? Taurus. Radial field. There it is. Okay, radial field. Make it that a child as well. And Alt 0. And rotate that to lay flat-ish. Go into the coordinates and set that to 90 degrees. So now you can see it's laying in a spiral shape. If we set the field offset to 100 or 360, I think that means it'll start trying to twirl all the way around. There's all sorts of fall offs and whatnot on there, but they definitely do seem to be getting flung above, but they're hanging out mostly below, mostly because gravity is still having a slight effect on them. So that is direction based. Oh, but there's a big old field fall off here, so there's no power on them in the center. That makes sense. So what we really should do is this spherical field. I'm going to delete that, and now it's full power. Now immediately you see them twirling around, which, you know, that's neat. Inside of that spherical direction, that's where I want the fall off to be. So I'll just give it a mask. Yeah, so say mask, and that will be masked out by the spherical field. So that should be a very similar effect. Now this radial is very powerful. So we're just going to go easy on the strength here. Yeah, way back on that. Still pretty strong. Let's drop that to 1% and see if it actually does calm it down. Because it's possible it doesn't. Yeah, it still seems to be super full strength. I'll crank that back up and let's instead drag the slider down. Let's see if that actually weakens it, which it does seem to. Yeah, okay. Yeah, changing this max is better. So now we can give that whatever amount we want to kind of give them a bit of a flow, churning in a particular direction. Yeah, but anyway, the point being is you can see that we can always drop this back to the more simplified scene. We can just go back to these cubes. Fish school. Dynamic. Yeah, so that gives us the basics. And seems to work pretty well. Bum, 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 bum. Now, I wonder if we could build a little bit fancier of a system here. Let's go back to it looking like fish. Or we'll go back to it looking like worms. And just see what we get. They move quickly there, so and their length is going to be variable, so it's something to keep in mind. Depending on how fast they're going, their tail will be longer or not. But there they go. But yeah, in general, avoiding each other, and there should be a distinct flow to the way they move. Lots of different combinations. What did I want to do here? I wanted... Oh, I was going to turn on SSAO. Just give them a little placement. So yeah, got a giant swarm of them traveling around doing their thing. Okay, that's all good. I like it. Let's save again, and now immediately save as the next version. I have no idea how well this will work. I want to make a, not a fish rig, but let's make a slightly more dynamic baseline for ourselves. So here's our, I guess I moved all that out of the way. So there's our original cube, okay? Now, I want to make it a little bit more of a fish. So let's put the cube into a null, and that can be the head. And we'll keep it simple. Let's just say head, mid, and tail. So the middle bit will be there. We'll make it a bit skinnier. And the tail can be there, taller. So about as simple as we can get. Honestly, it might even be a good idea to let them get smaller as we go, but we'll just tinker around and see what happens. So let's say we're doing that. Those are all rigid bodies. We need to dynamically connect them. So connector, and that is the correct connector. I'm going to spin that 90 degrees, holding down shift. Eyeball this to the midpoint, make it a child of the head, and that will link the head to the mid. Copy that connector to the mid, move it to the tail. I want to connect from mid to tail. Each one is dynamic. Those should hopefully be interlinked. I shall turn off all the forces, and let's just see what happens if it falls to the ground. And keep in mind, gravity is really weak. Bunk. Seemed to work. Now, let's put gravity back to normal. You always right-click on one of the arrows, and that will reset it to default. So let's hit play. Bunk. Okay, yeah, cool. You see how it's bending? It is indeed bending. That's what I wanted to know. Okay. Now, each of these has its own different well, okay, before we get crazy, let's make a bunch of them and see if they work together. They're a lot more complicated, so I'm going to simplify and just say 5 by 5. And they're pretty big, so they need more freedom. Okay, so we got a whole cluster of them, and we hit play. And you'll see that, well, they all look like they did identical things, but if we stack a few of them, you will see that each of those, Cinema can handle each of these dynamically behaving independently. So you see that that one's bent differently than that one. So those connectors do work in a cloner, which is super important here. So I want let's see, how do I want to do this? We've got all these different forces. The main one is turbulence. That's like the direction that's getting pulled. I guess it's not the only force. But what I'd like to do is say these two are going to include things. So that there's no forces applied to the midpoint or the tail. But the head does still have forces applied. And then I'm going to say the tail has way more damping. I'll do 99%, which is a lot. So yeah, already, if I hit play, do you see how the tail is kind of lagging behind? It's tipping the head forward. The idea here is by putting more drag, more linear damping on the tail, that the head is more inclined to move forward. That's the idea. So let's go and remove all gravity and reactivate our forces and just start to see if we get anything. Okay, pretty wacky. I'm just watching any individual fish, and it's not horrible. The head's getting whipped around, but the tails definitely in general are lagging behind the head. So that's something. And there is almost like a motion to them. Now, I wonder if we could make them a little more inclined to stay vertical. That's not trivial. Or maybe it isn't. Or maybe it is trivial. Let us make another connector. I don't know if this will work. I want a connector that connects the head to nothing. Okay? And hit play and see if they don't move. They should be stuck. Yeah, they're all stuck in place, okay? Then I'm going to try putting it on a slider. Is that a good idea? Maybe it needs to be on a twist slider. Well, they're free to move up and down, but they're not tilting over. And the heads are spinning around super crazy. You see the slider should be saying they can spin around and go up and down. It's connected to nothing. Oh, yeah, but they're unable to move now. They're stuck on that. Maybe we can do it with like a box. Yeah, look at that. Okay, I changed it to a box type, and this is not limiting on anything, but it's based on a box, which means it can move, but it can't rotate. Now, are they not able to rotate? I'm trying to see if they heads turn. They do seem to. I think that it's allowed to move. It can rotate, but it can't twist? I don't know. Hard to tell. Maybe they can't. Yeah, none of yeah, never mind. None of these heads are at like a 45-degree angle. They're all very static. But you know, that's not even necessarily a bad thing. Depending on what we do with the rest of the rig. Although that does stop them from moving up and down. I wanted them to stay more vertical and horizontal. I'm trying to think of a way I could do that. I mean, we could. I do have a way. It's a little more complicated, but what not? Why not? We're having fun. Well, I'm enjoying myself anyway. Let's make not quite so many and give them a little more space. And let's randomize them so we can tell the difference between them. So I think we've already got a random, so we'll say that that should also randomize the color. That's fine. If we get rid of the minimum, we should get lots of good colors. There we go. So, okay, I got rid of that one connector. Here's the thought. If, I guess we can do it on the head. I'm going to make a duplicate of the head. And let's call that one up. Okay? And turn off the cloner for a moment. So, the idea here is, what if we make a little... We got a top part of the head, okay? Yeah, I mean, this works here. Yes. I'm going to take the head and let's make it really skinny, okay? And then we got this upper part of the head. So essentially we're keeping the same idea. I've just divided it up. So that's now the upper part of the head. So that's the up head. It is going to... Let's put a second connector in the head. And this time, that is going to be a fixed connector. And it's fixed from the head to the up. And then we'll make a down. And now there's another connector, and that connects the head to down. Down gets a negative value on the bottom. So now we can have a lower part of the head and an upper part of the head. We can now, in theory, apply different forces to those. So let's keep this as conceptually simple as possible. Hopefully people kind of follow what I'm doing. The idea is if I make a wind, and then I'm going to say this wind is always blowing up. Straight up. So that wind is always blowing up. That is upwind. Then we have another wind, and this one always blowing down. Downwind. We need to give them, well, it almost goes to we can give them an arbitrary amount of strength. Let's say 50, which is sizable. And that's applying to everything right now, actually. Even this is seeing that. So I'm going to say exclude the up and down wind so that the head, which is the only thing that was getting forces, is not getting those. So the up and the down, I'm going to say that they should only include certain things. So up only sees the upwind, and down only sees the downwind. Everything else should be ignoring it. But because they are in different spots, up is pushed up, down is pushed down, but they should have the exact same amount of power. So they kind of cancel each other out. But because they're applying different parts of the body, that might encourage it to stay in a particular orientation. So let's hit play and see if we get something. What are we getting? Did I do it backwards? I'm not sure because it flipped sort of upside down. First thing I'm going to do is like overpower it. So let's say 500. Whoa, slam. Oh, I only had downwind selected. Sorry, fish. Okay. So try that again. What do we got? Yep. Well, he flipped upside down. I wonder if I have it backwards. Because it flipped upside down and now it seems consistent. So am I being cruel to this poor thing? The up. Yeah. Oh, why did those... They seem to have zeroed themselves out. Did I not build them at 0? Okay, I'm going to move up. Up 10. I'm going to move down. Down 10. How did those reset? Well, okay, down is down, up is up. Hit play. Okay, nice. Hey. That seems pretty good. I mean, it was just a super random concept, but it seems to be working. Now... That's just a thing to encourage it to go in a particular orientation. Actually, here, look, we can prove it. If I grab both of them and rotate it, does the... Yeah, look, the fish rotates with it because the wind is so strong. It's like, no, you have to go that way. You have to go that way. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, cool. So that concept totally works. We've now kind of made this vertically buoyant fish. The strength that we apply, we can just change them at the same time. And we don't have to have this be too strong. Let's say like 25. So now it's like, in general, it wants to stay up. And... Let's even grab one of them and say custom. So like that's the upper one, just so we can see it. And now in general, it's trying to stay up, but it's not like super heavily forcing it up or down. And yeah, it's able to do its thing. That makes sense to me. So turn on the cloner and hit go. And now we got our swarm of fish. They want to stay vertical. They definitely seem less inclined to move. But these ups and downs are so... Okay. I just told the up and down, I told them that they're not seeing the overall forces, but they are way bigger. The top and bottom of the head are really big, which means they weigh a lot. And then this main field force is only applying to like this little flap in the middle. So it is not heavy enough to really pull it. So where I told the up to only see upwind, I'm going to say, you know what? Also go ahead and see the field force and also see the turbulence and also see the overall force. And now you immediately see them go crazy. Let's also do it with the down. So yes, also see the field force, also see the force, see the turbulence. Okay, so now all of those have lots of forces applied all over the place. Now, with them having more forces, let's start cranking up the power of our wind. So let's go, let's go too far, presumably too far. Yeah, as soon as I turn that, you see they really snap to trying to be vertical, but they are still moving around. So that's too much. Let's go about to the midpoint. They wiggle back and forth a lot. I'm going to try, and now it's just playing with it. I'm going to grab the tail, and let's, I put a lot of linear damping on there. I'm going to actually reset that, and let's just put some drag. A little drag goes a long way. So let's go with a lot of drag and see what happens. I mean, the head definitely is still the thing that moves forward. When I look at any one of them, if they're moving in a direction, they're moving forward. They can move up and down, but yeah, they're definitely, the tail seems to lag behind. Now, we could also do some lift on there. I don't typically do too much lift, but because of the shape of the tail, it actually might do something. I mean, it's weird. These are all cubes, so they're really clunking into each other. Dynamically speaking, we could probably say that these should all be calculated as spheres, which means they're more smoothly going to get past each other. So even though they look like cubes to us, so we can make more clones, you see them hopefully moving through just fine. We could put a spring. You could even put a motor so that the tails like flap back and forth. I'm not going to go that far, but. And they do jiggle back and forth a lot. We have a lot of strength on this generally up, generally down. So, yeah, there's a lot of push and pull we could do kind of everywhere. But it is neat to see that we could give it an orientation to a degree. I'm trying to think if there's any way that we could stop this oscillation on them. I guess we could just do a lot of linear rotation drag. Or right now we're not draining any energy from the head or the rotation of the head. So if I set that to like 90, they're allowed to turn, but they just turn more slowly. Yeah, it doesn't really seem to be draining all that much off of it. 99. Maybe a little. It's a weird one. But yeah, the whole swarm's going. It's running pretty well. They have a direction and they can't intersect each other anymore. And, I know we made the super basic one, but I wonder if could a cloner, could we make like a whole rigged fish and then put these different parts in it and then just have the dynamics actually do the driving on that? Probably. So we'll add in a few more fish. I'm not sure. Okay, we're probably about 30 frames per second right now. So it's about as fast as we can go. Or as many as we can do and still have it be pretty much real time. Definitely still some oscillation. I'm trying to think of ways around that. But I do like the up and down method. I don't know how interesting everybody finds going super deep on these dynamic things like this, but I like them. Swarming, swarming, swarming. Now, you could probably get some, like a lot more, you might be able to get a lot more mileage from this type of thing if we change the look of the fish maybe a little bit. Like maybe we could make it a little bit more eel shaped. Pretty straightforward because, well, that's the mid. I guess I'll just let's just keep sticking in more mid parts. So we'll keep that. And we'll say mid connects from mid to other mid, and then duplicate it again. And let's do it one more time. So we're just making a longer fish now. And we'll say that this mid connects from mid 1 to mid 2, and then mid 2 is connecting to tail still. That all makes sense to me. These correctly moved along. Let's just distinguish the tail a bit, doing something like that. Make it a little more fishy shaped. And maybe even these could be a little less wide. Making a fish. Yeah, there's a fish for us. And those should all be interconnected. So if that's a fish, all the same rules apply. Yeah, they're still trying to stay vertical. It's based on the head. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put a little bit more buoyancy on like maybe the midpoint of the fish. Let's see, all of these other ones, I don't think there was much drag on those. All the drag was on the tail. So a little bit of drag on the mid-body part might calm that down. And then a spring to keep them straight might go a long way. Like right now it's totally allowed to bend, which is potentially good. You see the head is the driving force here. Wherever the head goes, everything else goes. And the tail stays really far behind. But you could put springs if they only want to rotate so far, or keeps on constantly trying to straighten itself out. Yep, that's a fish. And that's a bunch of fish. The extra drag seems to be enough to stop them from moving super crazy. So potentially you could crank up the power of the turbulence and or power of this overall thing. Yep, angry swarm of fish. Fun and weird. I like it. All right, what time is it? Oh wow, time's been flying. It's been fun though. Let's see. Crash is asking, do these recordings get saved on Twitch? They will be on Twitch for a little bit. I post them on the Rocket Lasso archive channel, so I guess it's worth mentioning, especially since somebody asked. If we go to, let me open up a good window here. Rocket Lasso YouTube. So, if you go to the Rocket Lasso YouTube channel, so it's just YouTube/Rocket Lasso. Boop. If you go here, then you'll be able to see, well, first of all, this is live, and here's where I post all the official videos and tutorials, but you'll see that I have a different channel called the Live Stream Archives. So if you click on that, it's going to go to the Rocket Lasso Live Archives. You see the icon changes to the little broadcast thing. And this channel is where I put all of the replays. And they usually get posted a week later. I post them pretty quickly on Patreon. But yeah, all the replays end up there. And I even put notations on all of them to be able to jump to the specific time code and see all the different parts. So yeah, I just posted on Patreon the R25 recap video, but yeah, that's a thing too. Okay, we might be able to tackle one more question. Trent is asking, is 25 really all that different from 24? It's different in the way it looks. I know a lot of people, I don't use Blender. I've never really used Blender. I used Blender once 10 plus years ago. For like a couple days, and at that time the interface was terrible. I know it's improved a lot, but my point being is a lot of people have like tweeted and commented that it looks like Blender's interface. I don't know Blender. I have no baseline for it. So to me, this just looks like a darker color scheme with simplified icons a la Apple and browser functionality. Like we've got browser tabs and then layout tabs. So to me, this just looks like a darker layout combined with a web browser. So that's my take on it. As far as differences, or is it really all that different? They changed some stuff with nodes. They added in spline functionality when it comes to nodes. They've added capsules. They added the spline importer, which is really neat if you're doing Illustrator stuff. But it's, I mean, me just speaking myself, I think it's probably the smallest update they've ever done in my lifetime of using Cinema. But it's also important to keep in mind that they are doing 2 releases a year. So if you combine 24 and 25, which in the past would have been 1 release, that would have been a pretty meaty release overall. So, you know, gotta keep it in context. But if you're in subscription, you just have the new one automatically, so. Trey, question, client work. Is there a way to render this in a way that the screens can be changed in post and that would also affect the reflections of the scene? This is not a question for me. Oh, and you're linking to Dropbox. I can't really, it's a Dropbox, but linking to an image. Yeah, I guess I can pull it up. But unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to have a good answer for you. So it's just a picture of like these screens. But you can see it's reflecting all over the place and showing the character and everything differently. There's a really old plugin I remember somebody demoing, and seriously, this is like more than 10 years ago, where it was like you could render out, essentially, it would almost look like a vertex map. I'm sorry. You could render out what looked like a normal map on a screen, and then in post, pixel for pixel, like the plugin would be like, oh, the red pixel should be replacing the upper left corner, and the right pixel should be replacing this. That might work if it's masked out to apply, but this is unfortunately, this is more like a post effects question, and rarely leave cinema. So, yeah, I don't. I sadly don't have anything for you. But somebody in chat might have a good answer for you. I just don't. Tobias, as always, thank you. He's linking to the Rocket Lasso Slack channel. I'm posting this on the YouTube chat as well. You can go and join the Slack channel and continue the conversation. A lot of the same people in these chats will be there, helping each other, asking questions, answering questions, posting work. You get an automatic at the live channel every time I'm going live. Oh, I guess it's also important to note that today is probably the second to last stream. Next week might be the season finale. There might be one after. I gotta check on some stuff, but there's a good chance next week will be the last episode. I'm checking if YouTube has any questions because I've been mostly answering from Twitch. Do I think there will ever be a repository for capsules for people to share? I think yes. I'll say that I personally have a concern that as nodes become more robust, and right now they're not production ready still, which I'd love to start seeing them get production ready. But as we move forward, we are going to be getting more robust nodes. But I personally have a worry that we're going to end up in a landscape where there might be a lot of really crappy or not well thought out assets getting distributed all over the place, like people posting them for free on Twitter, people having Patreon set up where it's like, oh, here, I made this quick tool, It goes to like when we at Rocket Lasso, when we release a tool, there is so much thought put into it. We spend so much time doing thousands and thousands of lines of code, and I'm worried that we're going to be in a world where somebody takes a cube and then puts a couple of extra controls on the cube and they call it like, you know, I made the alpha cube, and somebody's like, I made the beta cube, and somebody's like, I made the gamma cube, and we get all these slight variations on a cube. But imagine that concept on everything of like, oh, look, I made agreeable, and somebody else has agreeable, and somebody else makes agreeable, and somebody else makes agreeable, and you get a bunch of like low level agreeables, and they're not specifically compatible with each other, and there's not. My point being is, I would love to see a curated store or rated asset repository for things in the future, because it is really easy to do bad design on an interface and things that aren't clear and things that aren't obvious and things don't follow like a logical progression or a setting that doesn't explain in a really clear way what the tool does. It's really easy to make bad tools. So I'm worried that there might be a flood of bad tools, but we're not there yet. So yeah, I'm curious about it in the future. A bunch of people trying to help with that image replacement question. Scrolling up. There was questions earlier that the chat has way moved past. Scott's asking if the Rocket Lasso plugins are working in R25. Yes, they are. All 4 Rocket Lasso plugins are already compatible with R25. They're already up on Gumroad, so you can just go re-download them. We didn't change the increment number because it's all the exact same code except for the compile. So like literally, it's still called, a lot of them are still called 1.0. And that's because the R24 didn't change. So just re-download the same one. Did we tackle that one? I think we might have tackled that one. And then Apoxia was asking, is there a fancy way to bake a vertex map? Bake a vertex map? I don't even know if there's any way of baking a vertex map. Those fish look pretty good, though. Like, we could definitely spend more time. But I do like these big old dynamic rigs. Is there a way of baking a vertex map? Does anybody know if there's a way of baking a vertex map? Do Alembic files have some sort of vertex map built in? That's my question. Let's just keep it simple. Make that editable. And we need to go to point mode, selection, set vertex weight, 0. Whoa. Oh. Use fields. Don't freeze. Feed in the noise. I just want to see some randomness here. Increase the scale. Grab the remapping. You can see that noises never quite reach white. They never quite reach black, or yellow and red in this case. So something I usually do in this type of circumstance is turn on a curve, and even that little ease in and ease out that we get is going to go a long way. And if we select both, actually, oh, those curves don't match. But yeah, if you may increase these a little bit, you'll actually see them get to yellow and get to red. But anyway, you can now see that that's there. I want to make sure that that is animated at a decent speed. Okay, so you can clearly see some animation. We can make it even more blatant if we want. Okay, so clearly animated. Can we bake that out? Right-clicking and saying bake as alembic. We have to save the scene file for it to get baked in automatically, or for it to know where to go. Baking vertex maps. Boop. Okay. Right-click. Bake as alembic. Turn that off. Now, you'll see that there is an alembic map. I've now selected it. If I hit play, yes, that is now baked out. I would say that that is probably your best bet, because let's do a experiment. Create a new plane. We'll even double the, actually we'll triple the subdivisions. Okay, I'm going to hide visually the other two. Make it editable. I'm just going to steal that vertex map so that I can delete it and try and drag this one in. Yes. Okay. Look, I've now baked this out to alembic. It is now stored that vertex map, and it's hidden. But now I can use my new plane, which is live inside of Cinema, make a new vertex map at a way higher subdivision, drag in the one from alembic, and it's seeing it live and playing back. So I'd call that a definitive yes. We can even put that in average mode, and now that will come through and blur those nicely. And yeah, that totally transferred over. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, Apoxia, but totally works. Wouldn't it count as an alembic? I'm not sure. Is it bad? I mean, alembic seems to work so smoothly in Cinema that I never hesitate to turn something into an alembic. Could you add the vertex map to a C4D shader, colorize it, and then bake it? And you get a texture that way. I mean, you can't really bake textures like that. The, like we've now got a baked out, oh, maybe I know what you mean. Okay, so that's a different type of baking it out that you are saying. So let me see if I can demonstrate that. Copy, new, paste. Show. Okay, so if we were to make a new material, and if you don't know, you've now got the material manager hidden right here, and I do like it being placed right here. It doesn't have to be in the object manager all the time. It's right here next to the object. You'll apply it instead of dragging it. It's vertical now, which means we can read the names. So I like all that. But you can also right-click on an object, go down to New Default Material, and just make a new material without ever going into the manager. And if you double-click this, it'll actually open up the editor. So I was able to make it without ever going into the material manager. Anyway, inside of Effects, we can make a, well, let's make it as blatant an example of what you're talking about as what I think you're talking about. Making a fusion, I'll make a noise, and then turn on mask, and then I shall make a gradient. And then in the mask, feed a vertex map, which will be this vertex map, which, yeah, you can even see it's working fine in the viewport. So you can see that we got a gradient that's transitioning into a noise via that map. Now, I don't know if it'll actually show up very, yeah, actually even hitting play, it's doing a pretty good job. So I think the question is, could you bake this down? Could you make this be the material? And that is a fine question. Let us see what we can do. Now, this is going to be dependent, if it works at all, it's going to be very dependent on UVs. This plane already has good UVs. If you don't have any UVs, you can use Cinema's tools to very quickly apply UVs. Assuming, I don't know if this will work, but if we, this is now saved, if I add a other, where is it hide? I don't use this one very often. Probably render. No. It's not other modeling. Probably material then. Yeah, bake material. So here's a bake material tag. It wants to save out somewhere. So let's save it. Keep it simple. Save it as a JPEG. Save it to this episode. Make a new texture folder. And name it, I don't know, Vertex Map Test 1. Okay. Currently set to 200 by 250. All right. What are our options? I want to bake the color channel. Automatic UV. Right now, this would automatically try and do its own thing. If we say off, then it should be looking at the current one. If I click preview, then yeah, look, we get a, there's the noise. There's the white, there's the dark based on the vertex map. Now, well, it's an animated one. If you don't have an animated one, I think this would work for you. So let's crank up the resolution a bit. We'll just add a 0 on there. And if I say, yeah, the preview is not getting any bigger than that. But yeah, right now it's only looking at the color channel. Details, we could put like, oh, there is a time. Look at that. Formats and everything. Okay, so even if you were animating it, let's do it not animated to start. So if I just say bake, you see going through. There's our vertex map. There's the noise. It's there. And now we've got a still image. And now if we were to make a brand new material and load in on the color channel an image. Scene file, texture, there it's baked out. Load that in the color channel. Now I shall apply it. Boop. There you go. It's now baked out. Now, keep in mind, it's going to look different in the viewport because even this original material, you see it looks like that in the viewport. But if I render, you see how it's actually a smaller noise. So even though it's representative of it, it's not like 100% accurate. So anyway, there it is, baked out and applied. And the vertex map is now baked in that material. That material, of course, would be... let's go track it down. Not that this is strictly necessary, but into 32, go into scene files, texture, and there you go. You see I've baked out as a JPEG, and now it exists there. Now, let's do a quick test to see if we can do the animation. So I'm going to move out that one, which is the animated one. If I play, we still see the motion happening. Bake, details, render current, render data. That might just take it from the scene file. I shall manually type in 90. Frame rate 1, I guess. Material tags. I guess we could, yeah, limit to material tags, but that should be fine. It might be a little big right now, so I will drop this down to 555. 555. And bake. 1, 2, 3. Look, you can see the animator. Oh, interesting. Maybe the frame rate does matter. I'm going to say it only did, here's in the folder, you can see it only did 5 of them. So maybe this frame rate does matter. So let's say 30. Maybe it's 30 frames per second. So bake. Yes, override. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, now you see those transitions are a lot slower. And right down here you can see it processing. It's not giving an overall timeline. So keep in mind if you made a really giant one, and that's taking a while, but you can definitely see it moving and animating. So yeah, you can even output an entire sequence seeing the vertex map, and it's doing its thing. It's going to have to do that 90 times, but it's doing it. And it'll be a TIFF sequence. Of course, a TIFF sequence is a good way of bringing it back in cinema, but the TIFF sequence could also be put into something and turned into an animation. It looked like, it's still going. Hopefully there's not too many more. Let's see, it is done. I don't think there's a way of saving it as a movie. Oh no, the movie options are in here as well. It looks like I could have saved it as a movie if I wanted to. So yeah, pretty cool as well. Once again, you need the UV map. It was viewing the UVs as they were, and that's what's getting output. So a more complicated UV would have been outputting a more complicated image, and your resolution goes a long way. Make sure you're looking at the relevant channels. Each one will save out as a different layer. I think if it's a Photoshop document, it might be able to put them into a single file. But yeah, there's a lot of good settings here. And the bake, as long as you have good UVs, the bake works well. So yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, cool. It seems like Alex is happy with that. checking about follow-ups. When that counts as limbic. Yeah, animated materials for PNG. And yeah, those could be output to other, anything. Those could be brought in as video backgrounds, or it's a good way of rendering out a bunch of noise. Even potentially like a looping noise. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about it that way. But if you rendered that out on a cylinder, that would be a perfectly looping noise. If you did it on a sphere, you could get a looping one on the sphere. I guess as a quick, for instance, if I make a cylinder and I turn off the cap, we'll give it a couple extra radial segments. If we apply that material on, then you can see it's getting applied around. But if I were to render, I guess that material, I'm not going to save over this one, but we don't need the vertex map anymore. Let's just take a noise, cinema noise. Something like a Naki. And I'm not even going to animate it, but if we say bake, I stole that one, give it a new name, test 2. Also, I've now got 90 images in here. I will delete all of them. I don't need them. Bake as map 2, details, render out from 0 to 0, frame rate 1. So now it should only be the one frame again. And let's go back up to something a little bit bigger, 2222. And preview. Whoa. Wow, why does it get dark? This is the color channel. Does the color channel come with lighting information? The other one was flat. I'm just going to move into the luminance channel. Okay. Not color, luminance. Preview. Huh. Still gets that darkness on there. Why would that be? Does that make sense? Am I missing something? What? What did I just do? Now it didn't do it. I don't even think I changed anything. Whatever. I hit bake. So now we get that giant image. Keep in mind, we have now passed what is essentially a loop through a cloud of 3D noise. Meaning, if I open this up in Photoshop, boink, and boop. Okay, so now we've now got this noise rendered out. It's looking pretty good. The idea is if I say filter offset and we do a offset, see vertically we get that line, but horizontally like the cylinder went around, look, there is no loop. So we've made a perfect tiling noise left and right with no seam, and it's not like a faked Photoshop no seam. It is now a perfect 3D no seam. Get rid of, oops, I guess I wanted the opposite one. But yeah, I just want to test that because that's kind of neat. That opens up some possibilities. Yeah, that's cool. Okay, yeah, I don't bake out materials very often, but there's definitely seems to be some options there. Yeah, I'm not sure what was causing that because it just went away. Thank you, Trey. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know a lot of people, I mean, during the live stream, I try and do it in the hours that a lot of people can be watching or listening. I know, this is a little bit US centric, but in Europe, people are, around evening time. So it's not super late or terribly early in the morning for anybody. But I know a lot of people put it on in the background and have it like on their second monitor in the corner. And then if they hear me get excited about something, then maybe they zoom in and check it out. Let's see. Yeah, that should, I guess that's going to cover it. We actually tackled a lot of different types of questions today. So really good questions, everybody. Really fun to go and tackle these. Next week, as I mentioned, is probably the season finale. And if you're familiar with past years, sometimes I have some giveaways. And this year, we do have some of our own tools to potentially give away. So make sure to mark your calendar to be here. As always, you'll have to actually be live and present to get it. So, it'd be cool to come and hang out then between seasons, or, the last thing before seasons. And then we'll set the calendar for season 4. Trying to think of anything else. I guess one tiny thing, because I mentioned it in the video, but if people aren't familiar, I did make I probably opened it recently. No. There. I did release these dice models on Patreon, and I think I put them at like a really low level. So even if you're only supporting at $5, I made every type of basic die. So we have a D4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20, and they're really clean. I made them as clean as I could. So you see all these nice little clean details. They should have pretty good UVs overall, and it's just something I had for a while, so I made them available on Patreon. That's some models. I might put them up on Gumroad and then put like a 100% off coupon. But yeah, you can see them there, and I used them in the R25 video to talk about the updated cappuccino. And I've also got them here in my own folder inside of Dice, so there they are. Select all of them and load. Oh yeah, and the real world scale, so they're really tiny. But yeah, all these dice. But they work really well with dynamics. Well, even just doing that where I just dragged all those around, what's great about the dynamic placement, and I don't use dynamic placement too often, it's just not the type of work I do, but I could select these and say copy, paste, 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 paste. And so I got a ton of those all on top of each other, and then move into the dynamic placement one. Which one's dynamic placement? Yeah, that one, I think. And they might be really tiny, so I don't know how well this will work, but as soon as I go to move them, yeah, you see them all explode out, and now they're all piled up. So as simple as that for them not overlapping, but staying clustered together. And then I could move them apart or move them together, and then spin them around, and then drop them. Whee! So yeah, dynamic placement, pretty fun. And you could also just paint with them. But yeah, the dice are pretty fun addition to put in there. And then you put these into some MoGraph or some MoGraph to get different colors assigned to every single one of them. And yeah, and if anybody's interested, well, I'll have to think about it, but let me know if there's any interest, because these are the baked down versions, but I have like the parametric versions of these where potentially like the fonts could be changed and whatnot. But yeah, just an extra bonus. Let me track that down and put a link in the chat, just because, yeah, it's a neat, or I was happy to put those out. I often think I don't want things just rotting away on the hard drive. And I go and spend time. I made those originally for a demo for one of the versions of Cinema. I might have even made those for a demo for Ricochet or for Recall. Here it is. Load up. Okay, cool. Here's a link on Patreon. I think if you're supporting at the $5 level, then you get access to all of those just for fun. But any support's always appreciated. And like I said, there are extra discounts on Patreon for buying any of the tools. Let's see, I've lost my broadcasting software. Okay, cool. Anyway, well, we're just a little bit over today, so not too bad. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out on another Rocket Lasso Live. I'll see you next week for possibly the finale. So that'll do it. Bye-bye, everybody.